All right, philosophical question.
All right.
Do you think entrepreneurs are born entrepreneurs, or can anyone become one?
I don't think anyone can become one, but you can definitely develop the skills.
Okay.
So, as you can imagine, there's a huge correlation between millionaires and entrepreneurship. In fact, in a Fidelity study, they found that 86% of millionaires are entrepreneurs. Wild.
That's wild. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Sounds like the path to become a millionaire.
Is it really, though?
I don't know.
Is entrepreneurship worth it? Let's talk about it.
Welcome to Net with Lizzy and Lissa, where we analyze hidden costs and empower you to make your own damn decisions in life. Each episode covers a different facet of life, and at the end of each episode, we each give our takes on whether we think something is net positive or net negative.
I'm Lizzy, a strategist and consultant with over 17 years of experience in finance and investing.
And I'm Lissa, an accredited financial counselor and personal finance content creator. We're best friends who talk about money
And everything else.
So, is entrepreneurship worth it?
Whew, this is a big one. It's a big one. All right, first up, running the numbers on entrepreneurship.
All right, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, there were a record-breaking 5.5 million new business applications filed in 2023. For reference, there are 3.5 million applications from 2019.
All right, so that's a lot of growth
2
there.
2 million more
That's a lot.
a couple years later.
Okay. Well, according to Gusto's 2024 New Business Formation Report, half of new business owners are women, which, hell yeah.
Yeah.
And that is a huge shift from just 2019 when it was only 29%.
Yeah, so like
Let's go, ladies.
under a third to half.
Half.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And it's Gen Z and millennials who are most likely to become small business owners in 2024, according to a QuickBooks entrepreneurship report. 28% of Gen Z said that they would consider starting a business this year.
Okay. But look, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, about 50% of businesses that started in 2018 failed by their fifth year. And the main reasons are lack of capital or lack of demand for their service. But I've always wondered with those stats, does that account for people who just choose not to operate their business any longer?
Yeah.
Because you know us entrepreneurs,
Right.
we be switching it up.
Yeah, it could be. And finally, not surprisingly, I think, according to Fundera, more than 70% of owners say that they work more than 40 hours per week, so more than your typical 9-to-5er.
That's facts.
Yeah.
So we know there is a lot of money to be made in entrepreneurship, lots of potential, but it definitely has its risks and its costs. So let's talk about it. Is entrepreneurship worth it?
That's such a loaded question.
People don't even know. You don't even know.
All right, so what do you define as entrepreneurship? Like when you start a business or start an idea?
I think it can be broad. You know, some people really like segregate between, oh, you're a freelancer versus you are like growing an enterprise.
Yeah.
But I think for the sake of this, yeah, you have a business and it may be a side hustle that is contributing to your, financial well-being, or it may be, your primary source of income or something that you're really dedicated to. But yeah, I think so.
All right, random question. Do you think entrepreneur and small business owner is the same or has a lot of overlap? Because, well, for many reasons, but here's one example. Someone could buy a small business from someone and then run it, but they never came up with the idea. They didn't build it. Are they an entrepreneur for doing it?
Oh man, we're getting right into it. Honestly, I think there is a distinction, but for the sake of conversation,
There's
I think
a lot of
we could
overlap.
talk about running a business,
Okay,
right?
running a business.
Because to me, there's a distinction in entrepreneurship of mindset and kind of ambition, and how that applies to the kind of innovation and growth path. But at the same time, most of the experiences that come with entrepreneurship apply to any business owner.
Okay. Here's why I thought of that. I got this certificate.
Let's go.
As part of the Bruin Business 100 for this year, for UCLA alumni, for my business. And it basically says, on here it says like providing products, services, or purpose that lifts the community while expanding and inspiring UCLA excellence and innovation. So like innovation, you said that, and that's kind of what stood out to me. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess, there's a difference between like if you're coming up with new ideas or like ways to be more efficient in the business and you're doing something innovative. It's a little different than kind of just operating like.
Yeah, and I think I encountered that distinction when I first left my job and operated, essentially a consultancy, and people would be like, oh, you're a freelancer. I'm like, no, I'm building a scalable business. Yeah. There's a difference. And so some of that is that distinction of, are you providing a service for money or a product for money or whatever it may be, or are you building a kind of living, breathing entity with its own infrastructure and systems and processes that can be replicable, that can scale. Right. There's kind of so many more components to building a large enterprise. Yeah. Even if that large enterprise still technically is a small business from a revenue standpoint.
So the way you said that, it kind of sounded like you're like between freelancers and entrepreneur and what you're actually doing. Do you think there's, I won't say a stigma, but like, looking at someone who's just doing a little side hustle, trying to make a little bit of extra money versus, like you said, trying to build something that'll scale, that could make, that could employ people, that could provide jobs, that could change the world.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, I encountered that for sure from people of, I think a freelancer is looked down on or not valued as much as even positioning myself at times when it was only me in my business. I didn't have, anyone working for me, but positioning myself as, when I'm a corporation, I am this entity versus I am just, my name and an individual. I think that kind of shifted things.
And there's nothing wrong with either.
Not
it's
at all.
Kind of just like what people assume an entrepreneur to be, or assume what a small business or a growing startup is supposed to be.
And I think some of it, to kind of get into the nuances of entrepreneurship, I think some of it is a perception of risk. I think people, when they think of an entrepreneur, they think of someone who is comfortable taking on risk for potential gain. And you don't necessarily see that with a small business owner. Now, as the daughter of a small business owner, my stepdad owns a construction business. It is a risk every day, trying to make payroll. I'll never, ever look down ever on a business owner. It is so incredibly challenging to try to keep this afloat and grow and somehow pay yourself. And so there's risk all around.
So just to get a little bit more context. Okay, we both consider ourselves entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
How about walk us through your journey of becoming one?
Yeah, it's something I never expected of myself, to be honest with you. I've always been heavily involved in businesses from my very first job, just because of my nature of like taking on so many roles at once. And I started in a small company.
Out of college?
Right out of college, or in college.
Okay.
I started a small agency and kind of immediately was really integral to the business. And I was there for 10 years. But I always thought I was too financially risk averse. I was really cautious and conservative and just afraid to be poor again, frankly. I was so afraid to not have money. And so I kind of dipped my toe in it. And in fact, I will never forget my ex telling me that I would never do that. Like just trying to tell me about myself. Like, oh, you would never be an entrepreneur.
When you would talk about potentially...
No, just... Oh. Yeah, I think at the time I had clients. I actually did have a side business. I took on clients in addition to my full-time job. But he had this vision of entrepreneurship like this big idea, right? It had to be a big idea.
Yeah.
And tried to tell me that I didn't have that in me, right? Which is
That,
wild.
and that wasn't a flag? That wasn't a red flag?
Oh, God, yeah. It might have been at the end. It might have been at the end.
Yeah. I mean, people talk shit. So.
But you know what? I because of the financial aspect of it, it took a lot. So then it was like 2017, 2018. You know, I'm ambitious. I always have a project. So I started putting on these workshops for free just to prove to myself that I could. They were all around personal development. Morning Sunshine is what the series is called.
Really cool workshops. I went.
Thank you.
I went to them.
And the last one was goal setting. And that process proved to me like, oh, hell yeah, I could do this.
Yeah.
Of course I could do this. And so for the goal setting workshop, I set the goal that I was going to quit my job. And the real reason was it was kind of my last big fear. Like, you joke like I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of a lot of things.
Yeah, she's not afraid of cockroaches. She's just
Not at
killed
all,
one
girl.
right now.
just rodents, that's it. But I didn't have a lot of I'd failed at the big things I felt like already, so I didn't have a lot of big fears except that. It was like, well, that's what I got to do then. So, yeah, I spent a year preparing. In hindsight, not at all in the way that I could have or should have prepared. I saved a lot of money to feel comfortable. And then I took the leap. I left my very, very lucrative job to own my own business.
Yeah. And Liz, you've always been in the marketing field.
I've always been
branding.
in marketing, branding, product, and always in the financial industry.
And then the business that you left for was?
A strategy agency,
Okay.
consultancy, brand strategy, and
Okay.
it's, business strategy.
Yeah.
So I took that leap, and 6 weeks later, COVID happened, and the world shut down, and it was insane. And I will never forget. I quit my job, or my last day was in January 2020. April 2020, I made $429, and I was like, shit. How are we gonna make this work?
I could do you one worse.
What you got?
0. Paying myself 0.
Oh no! That's not paying. That's
Oh, that's
revenue. That's
revenue.
gross revenue.
Okay.
that's paying. I didn't pay myself for
A while.
a year probably.
Okay. And I think that's something that business owners or entrepreneurs don't talk about. Is it's one thing to make money in your business, but like you got to pay for the operations, you got to pay for everything. So how much you're actually paying yourself and pocketing as your income?
Oh yeah, and there's two parts to that, right? So
Yeah.
like if you look at I have a corporation, so if you look at the revenue of my corporation, I've got a 6-figure business. I'm paying myself 6 figures
Yeah.
each year, but a lot of my expenses are paid for by my business.
Yeah.
So the reality of what, I have to report on my tax returns, and it's all legal, is very different because you have that ability to write things off and expense things.
Yeah. One of the benefits of business.
So that's my background. What about you?
So I was in the corporate world for majority of my career. Wealth for Women of Color, my current business that I'm building now, has been around for around 2 years. But interestingly, the company, my LLC that I formed that runs Wealth for Women of Color, has been open since 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't end up taking the leap to full-time self-employment, build this business, be an entrepreneur full-time until 2 years ago in 2022. So that's 9 years of having this LLC, of which I'm paying franchise tax fees because it's based in California every year, and either reporting like nothing because I didn't do anything with the business, or reporting a loss every year up until now, because like when you form the LLC, like that doesn't mean like there's an actual, like you have a storefront or anything, right? Like the LLC is just like, okay, I filed some papers and now what am I going to do?
That is this is going to be me being a hater.
What?
This is one of my biggest pet peeves.
When people open an
When
LLC.
people be like, I got an LLC.
And I'm a CEO.
Yeah, and it's like,
A CEO of
you went
what?
on LegalZoom and, spent.
Yeah.
And that's me being
But
a
that's
hater,
what
because
I
it's
did.
a positive thing.
But that's what I did. And like when you're working full time, and I was working full time at Google,
Yeah.
which was not a 40-hour-a-week job. It was at that time, was like a 60, 70-hour-a-week job.
At least.
Yeah, I was getting paid double time on some of my hours because I was working that much. So I don't know why I thought I could build a business or something meaningful on the side. Everything just got delayed. Like I had so many ideas, I used to make content in 2013. It was not about personal finance. It was comedy.
Mock MD.
It was comedy. I had this idea for a blog that I still want to do called Mock MD. So WebMD is a place you go online if you want to look up symptoms to like medical conditions. Mock MD was kind of like,
Dating.
it was about dating. It was like a mock site. Like I was mocking WebMD. And it was like symptoms that you look up to find out like, oh, is my man cheating on me? Like, does he have this like, like his eyes looking all over the place syndrome? Because, like it was supposed to be a blog that was funny, that I was hoping to monetize someday. But and I still have all the articles for it.
Oh, yeah.
I invested $1,500 to get a web designer.
Mm-hmm.
That was as much as I had extra to put towards this project at that time. It was a shitty experience because I knew nothing about building websites or anything. And it was this developer who said he could build what I wanted. And he just put together a WordPress site that now that I know how to do websites, I'm like, he didn't do anything for me.
Right.
So anyway, it became a waste of $1,500. I had all these articles written in Google Docs that just sat there. And then my business for years just sat there because I'm like, I want to do something else, but I don't know what.
Yeah.
But if I close this LLC, then I'm just...
You gotta have to restart it later.
Yeah, then I gotta restart it later anyway.
Yeah.
Which is not the end of the world to do, but it's like I already had the business bank account. I set up all the business admin, so it was hard to go backwards.
Yeah. And
so
for what?
until, we go years later, now a couple, 3-4 years ago when I really decided what I wanted to do, at least at this phase of life, I wanted to keep the LLC I had and start posting content.
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't start with Wealth for Women of Color. I started with an account called Shit They Don't Teach, which is supposed to be shit they don't teach you in school, which was another idea.
Yep.
So I'm just sharing this just to show you that there is literally not a straight line, especially for, I guess, if I'm a content business or a professional services business or a consultant, it goes all sorts of directions. And who knows, I might become a tech company later. But right now, it's taken so many twists and turns.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and let me not pretend like I haven't had the same journey. So I started Liz Marie Strategy in 2019, went full-time in 2020. And just within that business, it changed significantly in the first year.
Yeah.
I went 1 year of that desperation, scarcity mindset of, oh my God, I only made gross $400 in my third month. What the hell am I going to do? So I was taking on projects that didn't align with my long-term goals. I was just struggling, right?
Yeah.
It was so overwhelming. How the fuck do I make this grow? How do I get more clients? How do I scale? And ultimately I realized, ironically, since this is what I do for other people, my strategy wasn't aligned. So I rebranded at the end of my first year, or second full year, and kind of shifted my business, productized my business, did my whole brand differently. And that really started to take off, and it was successful. In the meantime, I started an Airbnb, which was kind of its own separate business venture with my partner at the time. So then I was starting to get stretched thin and burnt out. And you know what? I got to the point where it's I don't want to do this business anymore. I like it, and it was a good business, and I have the skill set, but I wasn't excited about it. Mm-hmm. And so then I shifted around a whole bunch. It was all right, I'm going to go into interior design because I've always loved that. And if you know me, you know I'm a designer at heart. And then I got this opportunity to join the founding team at a different startup called Revity that's in the short-term rental industry. So it made a ton of sense. And so I went there semi as a consultant, kind of hybrid, in terms I was an employee, but was there full time for 2 years. Left that earlier this year. Thought I was going to go back, head first into consultancy, and now have this opportunity where I'm now co-founding a fund. And that is my new venture, along with, my business partners and our joint venture. So it is not a straight line. And that's 4 years?
Yeah.
That's in 4 years.
That's
and
a
so
lot in 4
that's
years.
kind of why I wonder those stats of like this many businesses fail. Did they fail, or did people pivot?
Yeah, did they pivot? Did they just shut it down? Did they say, I don't want to pay this $800
Yeah.
California franchise tax anymore?
Or I
so
have
I'm
this
gonna close it?
opportunity over here. Because everyone I know who owns a business, not everyone, many people that I know, it is one of many businesses they have had or will have in their lifetime.
I totally like Spaced. I have another business. I have
Yeah,
a
hell
business
yeah,
that
you
I
do.
run with someone else. It started in 2018. I had taken some coding classes as a result of being annoyed by that one web developer who bamboozled me. So I'm like, I'm gonna learn how to code myself. So I took coding while full time, working. And then out of the coding class, one of my classmates and I were like, let's start a web development agency. Like, why not? So we did. And by year 2, we were profitable.
Yep.
And I treat it more like a side hustle. It's not fully scaled on its own, but it's a nice little bit of like side income. Like it's always been there. I don't talk about it. I don't publicize it. I even want to take my name and face off of the website because I'm like,
It's competing
people are
with
going to
your-
get mixed up with, am I a finance person
Right.
or this, like in branding. So anyway, I do have another business. Like I currently run 2 corporations.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do, girl.
So very interesting.
All right, so we got our backgrounds for some context. So let's get to it. What are the costs? We've kind of alluded to some of them, but
Okay, financial I want to jump into.
yeah.
So for both of my businesses, I guess you would consider it bootstrapping because we didn't get any funding. We didn't get any business loans. We didn't even think to say like, oh, maybe someone will invest in us. We were just like, all right, how much, you got a couple thousand, you got $1,000 to put into this. I got this. That's how I've done it. And in hindsight, not in hindsight, in the future, I may take a different approach. I may secure funding because right now I'm in a big hole in my current business because any money I make from it, I pour back into the business.
Yeah.
But in order to really grow and scale, you have a lot of expenses. So how did you approach finances?
Well, first I want to say that that's really normal. And I think it's important to normalize that if you don't have a broader business context, for example, being involved in those conversations in the corporate world or being in startups, you don't necessarily realize that like most businesses are not profitable for years. A lot of businesses, venture-backed businesses, are never profitable. Like big, huge
and
brands
these are
like
businesses
a
that have
Twitter or whatever.
These are businesses that have employees that pay people
that generate millions or billions in revenue. That doesn't mean they're profitable. So I don't want people to think that is a bad thing.
Yeah.
That's expected. It is an investment. For Liz Marie Strategy, when I started, I think I put like maybe $3,000, $5,000 in just like straight up upstart capital to fund my bank account. And then probably maybe a couple other like personal contributions over time. But I spent my whole first year prioritizing client work because I was so financially conservative or concerned that I was going to run out of money. In hindsight, I wish I had spent all of that time building a scalable marketing platform to not just get me a one-time client, but to get me clients repeatedly.
Yeah.
So I totally bootstrapped. With the other companies I've been a part of, one was had some small investment from like a friends and family, but was mostly funded by the founders. And then this situation as well is funded by one of our co-founders. But I have gone through that process of fundraising to take on outside investment, which is a whole other thing.
Right.
But yeah, that's significant. So there's the financial cost of literally just filing for an LLC or getting the materials, the supplies. One of the biggest costs is the biggest costs in a business are labor and inventory, typically for a small business. Not everyone starts off with employees. That's usually a DIY approach, but it's challenging. It's significant. And the kind of social media view, the idealization of entrepreneurship makes people think that it's going to be a little easier than it is, I think, financially, or that they have to be further along than they do.
But then if you think about the finances too, like what a privilege it is to be able to try your hand at entrepreneurship, because if people can hardly, pay their bills living paycheck to paycheck when they actually have a regular income, how do you even build enough of a, I guess, financial cushion in your personal life to enable you time to build the business? Because building the business is also like, your energy, and sometimes takes creativity. And if it's just not there, like you can't just expect that you quit your job and in 2 months you're going to build something to replace your income, right?
You cannot just expect that, y'all.
Yeah.
You cannot.
You can't. And for those of you that do end up doing it, cool. But guess what?
Amazing.
You're in a small percentage of people.
Yeah.
And
yeah, absolutely.
Shout out to you, and let's talk.
It takes time.
Let's be friends.
And I think most people that I've witnessed transition gradually, right? So I feel like there's a couple of paths. One is you have a skill, like for example, you have our tradesperson, right? I'll use my brother as an example. He's an electrician. He was, trained as an electrician, and then eventually you get tired of being the bitch or not generating all of the profit, right? And so then you decide to go out on your own. And that may be something you do gradually. You pick up side jobs, you build your clientele, et cetera. I actually think that can be a harder transition because you have spent all of your time in your training focused on executing on the service and none of it on the business, how much of when you've offered services, how much of your time do you think you spend on the service versus building the business?
Very little.
It's a fraction.
It's all on like operation strategy,
marketing. Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing to point out too, because you mentioned like the electrician, like that is a skill. That's a specialized skill. And most people, actually I don't have a stat for this, but like I don't have a MBA, or I never took business in school, neither did you. So a lot of it was learned like from experience. How do you think people who have like a specialized skill, hobby, idea, but don't have a business background, like how to navigate that?
I think it can be really challenging. And I think that's one of the reasons that there is a high rate of failure, because it's a little naive. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It just is that skill is going to equate to a successful business. But that said, honestly, fucking Google, YouTube. There's so many resources out there. I took Coursera classes on business strategy. But the biggest thing I think is that business is an exercise in experimentation and trial and error.
Yeah.
You're going to try 1,000 things, because ultimately the thing that works for a different business is not the thing that's going to work for you. It's a great idea. You can try it.
Yeah.
But every business is unique. Every audience is unique. So you just have to try shit.
Yeah.
And that's why it takes time. You're trying to find, product market fit is a big piece of it. And if you're, and what that means is that essentially you're offering something that people want.
Yeah.
And that's a little different for, small businesses that are really, I don't want to say common because that kind of makes it negative, but like an electrician, like a plumber, like a dry cleaner, right? That's just a common thing in a community. But if you're offering a product or something, new or different, or a differentiated service, it takes a long time to find the audience that wants what you have. And a lot of businesses never find it, including, funded, high-valued businesses. They never find that. And then, ultimately...
Yeah. Well, and that's because, okay, you can have this cool idea that you think everyone needs, but people don't know that they need it. So then you got to spend time and money marketing to convince them. And then,
Yeah.
like you said, most times you don't.
Or do they need it?
Yeah.
Do they
Or maybe
want it?
they don't actually need
They
it.
maybe that's a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
Is people, sure, that's a great idea, but do people actually, does that
Yeah.
align with the actual consumer behavior?
Or maybe they don't need it right now, but like in 10 years from now, it becomes the thing that
Right.
everyone needs. It's like
Right.
the right
Or they don't
timing.
need it at that price. Or maybe a very specific group of people need it, but you're marketing to everyone. So the people who need it can't find it.
Yeah.
And that's getting into my branding
Yeah.
stuff, but
Yeah.
that's another common problem.
Yeah.
All right. So what about the other costs? We talked about some of the financial costs. There's a lot more to it than that.
Okay. The cost of what? Your energy?
Time and energy, man.
Time and energy.
Time and energy.
Well, I have a different story to this because in my 2 years of being fully self-employed, building my business, I don't work 40 hours a week. I work
Right.
less
Right.
because I'm also in school getting my certifications. I'm also now at a place where my self-care and my mental health is at the forefront of everything.
Right.
So my business is growing a lot slower than I'd like it to, but I'm chill about it.
Right.
What
But
would,
that is also a position of privilege to be able to be that way. Yeah,
and,
for
and
sure.
not because like still I want to pay myself
Yeah,
more.
yeah,
Like
Yeah, for
but
sure.
so how about you? What has your time and energy cost been in your
Oh
various
man, it's been wild. I mean, when I
ventures?
was first starting, I was working as an executive at a fund. So I was had a full-time job and then some, and then also was doing this on the side. So it was extensive. And then in my first year full-time, partially because of the pandemic, there was nothing else to do. So I was working around the clock.
You could have made bread.
Huh?
You could have
I could have
baked
made bread. I could have got my sourdough on. Yeah, I was working around the clock. And that actually kind of leads me to one of the other costs, which is like the social costs. I mean, it really affected my relationship that I was in at the time. And some of that is needing a partner that understands it. But yeah, I was working all the time. I still have that now because I'm just starting a new venture where, it's 7 days a week. I'm in multiple meetings on Sundays but I don't mind it because it's also not 9 to 5. It's okay. I'm going to, take this meeting, then I'm going to go get a massage, and then I'm going to go to the gym. And that's during the week as well. So I have a lot more control over my schedule and my time and a lot more freedom, even if it is a lot of time.
But do you ever fear burnout?
Oh, I've experienced burnout.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you prevent that from happening?
I think for me, there's two things. It comes in phases, like expecting to go, balls to the wall forever is just not realistic. And I've had multiple points where I've had to come to that realization and be like, this is not sustainable. I know I want growth, or the business that I'm a part of wants growth, but we need to chill out because it's not worth the cost. Right now I'm in that high growth mode, but it is not at the expense of my sleep most of the time, or my exercise, or my taking care, eating well. So that's kind of how I'm prioritizing right now. Like as we speak, is my number one priority is my mental and physical health, and then honestly the second priority is this new venture, and then friends and family are fitting in around that, knowing that that's going to be that way for the short term.
Okay, so you're still able to use your time and energy for things like all the things you value.
Yeah.
Right. Your sleep, your health-related things.
Right.
Fitness.
Right now, what I'm sacrificing is, to some extent, I'm much more balanced at this now than I was 4 years ago. But now what I'm sacrificing is some social time. Mm-hmm. That's probably the biggest one, social time. And then also kind of what I would call free form relaxing. I don't watch a lot of shows. You know this about me. I'm not going to.
Except Bridgerton.
Last night, y'all. But I'm not a person to sit and like watch shows every day. I've never been that way. And so things like that, like, you know, I'll still read a book. Recreational, yeah, hobbies, stuff like that. That kind of falls by the wayside for now, knowing that this is like the startup first 2 months, big push. But I've experienced burnout enough to know that I have to find, you know, what's sustainable for me.
Well, interestingly, I dealt with burnout when I was working
you did.
at Google, my 9 to 5. And that's why coming into building my current business, I'm like, I will never be in that position again. I know the signs. I can read the signs as they come. Even if I do work weeks, like I said I don't work 40 hours a week. That's not exactly true. Like some weeks, if there's a sprint, like I'll work a little bit more. But then other weeks I might work like 15 hours a week, and that's it because I got other things going on. But again, like the growth of my business is dependent on how much I do. Right. So there's that to balance too, because I actually get a lot out of this business. We're talking about like the costs, but the benefits, right? I am so fulfilled every time. I get excited when we come to do this podcast. Yeah. I get excited when I am going to like teach a workshop or speak at something. Sometimes I hate filming YouTube videos, but I love it and I hate it. Yeah, you know,
because
like,
it's hard.
It's hard. But like I enjoy it. So then when I'm done with it, I feel accomplished. I feel fulfilled, and I feel like, oh, I've helped someone else because I've helped them with their finances. Right. So there's a lot of things I get out of it.
I think that's a really key point. We dug into this a little bit when we were talking about retirement in a prior episode. Check that one out. But it's in my personal experience, there's a difference between work, like a job, you know, I have to go to work, and I have a business. And the biggest difference for me is that it is so creative. And I'm such a creative person. I get fueled by that. So it's not to say that it's not hard or that it's, you know, not still you're not still susceptible to burnout, but the fulfillment is so much greater for me that I don't mind. A lot of the time, I don't mind jumping on this call because I'm excited. I'm motivated. Like, this is purposeful for me.
Okay. So earlier, at the beginning of the episode, you said that you don't think everyone can become an entrepreneur. So for the people who say don't want to work for 40 years until they can retire at age 59 and a half or, 62, 65. For the people who don't want that life, but might not have what it takes to build a full-on business, is there anything in between? Like, how do you get the best of both worlds?
Well, first let me say, part of the reason I say that I don't think everyone can or wants to.
A lot of people don't want to.
Is key, because I think many people really value certainty of outcome, security and stability, and I don't want to diminish that. I am not that person at all, but that doesn't make it better. It's just different. And so for those people, this would be a really challenging approach. And at the same time, there's also the fact that it's fucking hard. So not everyone is willing to do hard. Just that's the reality of life. That said, for those people, I mean, my first instinct is investing, you know. Yeah. That's kind of the middle ground, right? You want to grow your income over time. You put some away. Ultimately, you try to build something that provides you monthly income or cash flows, and you don't necessarily have to work.
Yeah, it's your money.
You put your money to work.
Yeah, it's not your own time and energy.
Right.
And you can still do it through investing in things and businesses that
businesses and support. Real estate and you know, wide range of asset classes. So that would be my instinct, is if you want to retire or not work a job forever, you can do that. Or, marry
Yeah.
someone rich or something.
I mean, I guess, yeah, that's always an option. The reason I asked that is because, as we're talking about, like, is entrepreneurship worth it? We've talked a lot about, like, the difficulties and the struggles and whatever. We touched a little bit on what's fulfilling and great about it. But for someone who's trying to make that decision and, like, maybe they're just bored at what they're doing right now, what would you tell them?
So it's funny because I knew how this would go. So I have a couple little stories. So my brother-in-law is a business owner, and when I was getting ready to do this, he was so excited for me, and he's like, "It is the hardest, best thing you'll ever do." And that has proved to be true. And similarly, when I was first getting started, another friend of mine, I used to work for her when I was in college, and then she started an agency. She recommended this book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And it is exactly about that. It is about how it is impossibly mentally challenging. It is a mind fuck every day. You can have the biggest win and then the biggest loss, and then it's terrifying, and how am I going to make this work?
Yeah.
And it's hard and tiring, and you are uncertain. But it is freeing, and it is fulfilling. And so I think the most important thing is to be really eyes wide open about it. And honestly, I don't think you'll ever understand what that is like until you experience it, because I didn't. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you feel. I thought that I knew, and then once I did it, it changed my whole perspective, which is why it can be hard for people who own a business to relate to people who don't.
Well, I felt that, I felt like I was a failure for many years because I had this LLC that didn't do shit. Every time I filed my taxes every year, I'd be like, yeah, didn't do anything with that. And then my accountant would be like, are you going to keep it open? And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to keep it open because I'm going to do something next year. So I always thought I was a failure. But the fact that I can talk about that now and look in hindsight and tell you that that wasn't a failure. I learned a lot of things. I learned that, not to work with that type of web developer. I learned like various things. Obviously, there was a cost to it. It cost money out of my pocket, but I didn't have to shell out, thousands of dollars to go to business school. I've kind of picked all that up along the way, and that's why I think Wealth for Women of Color is finding early success and is going to continue to. Because of it's not just this 2-year business. It's been a lifetime of learnings that has created this business.
I love that you said that, because if I could, there's two main benefits. We've talked so much about the costs, and I'll go on about the costs all day because I don't want people to take it lightly. It is hard. The biggest benefits to me are, one, freedom, just ultimate independence of your time and calling the shots in your own life. But two, exactly what you said, which is that the more you have these experiences, it forces you to get really comfortable with nuance, to get really comfortable with failure. And whether that's being comfortable that, all right, my finances are, tough right now, it's going to come through, right? Or this part didn't work out, this next thing will work out. The growth in my mindset to be able to tolerate that uncertainty and to tolerate nuance and to not be so dependent on a specific idea that I thought my life would look like has been the greatest gift for me.
And I know you're talking about that in life in general, so I want to point that out because obviously those learnings and stuff are very rooted and based in money, because the whole reason you're going to make that decision to work a 9-to-5 versus be an entrepreneur is around money and how you choose to make money. So like, as a financial counselor, like that's at the forefront of everything I talk about with clients. But what Liz just said in terms of like taking these risks and, learning through failure and adversity, all these ups and downs, it's not just learnings that surround your personal finance. Those translate to life, to your relationships, to your friendships, to what you choose to do. Like it impacts everything else. And so I do think there's this unspoken, priceless benefit through things like entrepreneurship, doesn't have to be that exactly, but that you can learn from. And even whatever, success, failure, who defines what those things are anyway? Like there's something to gain.
That's exactly that. I think when you go through that experience, you recognize that success and failure is kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
Because it's all about what that means to you and what you gain.
Yeah, you
from
define
it.
it.
You define it. Yeah.
All right.
You said it.
So, 20 cents. 20 cents is the segment of the show where both Lizzy and myself, Lissa, each get 60 seconds to give our 2 cents on today's topic, whether it is a net positive or net negative for entrepreneurship. I kind of have a guess of what it might be. All right, where does 20 cents come from?
Because you guys get the opinion of 2 dimes, y'all.
10, 20
dimes.
cents.
All right.
You get 60 seconds on the clock. What do you think, Liz? Is entrepreneurship worth it?
Entrepreneurship is worth it. It's a motherfucker, but it's worth it. For me, I could never imagine going backwards. Once you've experienced that growth, it's hard to close your mind to it and to want something different. That said, it is by far the hardest thing I've ever experienced. It's pushed me more than any other experience in my life. I've learned more, and it has been very challenging to my mental health and everything else, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Net positive.
Net positive. 15 seconds.
Yeah, that was quick. That was an easy one.
Quick and easy one. All right.
What about you?
Net positive. Quick and easy for me. And the biggest reason I'd say is because of the freedom that I have. I won't say that it's easy to make money. It's not. I think there's a path towards it. Like before I took this leap 2 years ago to build wealth for women of color, I had like the fattest emergency fund. I had business knowledge already. So it wasn't just like out of the blue. I think there's a path towards it if you want it. Not easy, but so fulfilling in that I get to shape what I do in life and who I get to talk to, who I get to impact, what things I get to work on. I'm still trying to figure out where I'm going to take it, but like freedom of time. I'm not going to include this in my 60 seconds, but quick side
story time.
It's story time.
It's just like I used to always, like when I was working full time and I had like a doctor's appointment, and I would go to my doctor's appointment, like let's say in like Beverly Hills. Like I would drive to my appointment at like 11 a.m. and be like, why are there so many people walking out and about? Like, what do these people do? What do they do for a living? Like, how do you not have to work a full-time job? And then like last week, I was doing the same thing. Like I had an appointment, but then right after I went to get some coffee and I'm like, oh, it's like middle of the day. I'm in my sweats. I'm like wearing this and just chilling. And I'm like, oh, it's because I took that leap to like get that freedom. So if that's something that's of value to you, like I do want you to know that there is a way, there is a path. It's not always the smoothest, but there's a path.
And it can be worth it.
It can be worth it. It can be worth it. All right. So remember, this is what we think at this moment in time. Both Liz and I are net positive for entrepreneurship, but no one can make that right decision but you. So what do you think? Is entrepreneurship worth it?
Hit us up. Let us know what you think. DM us on Instagram at netnetpodcast or email us at hi@netnetpodcast.com. And if you want to follow us individually, here's where you can find us.
I'm at Wealth for Women of Color on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram.
And you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at live_well_Lizzy.
All references, statistics, and resources mentioned can be found in our show notes. This podcast is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be constituted as financial advice or life advice. Remember to always do your own research, consult a professional as needed, and feel empowered to make your own damn decisions.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Season 1.